for Pakistan, it has just not been possible to imagine a economic framework for their national development. And it was just getting aid from the Americans, use their geopolitical location, so somebody else will pay the bills. Saudis will give them free oil, or Chinese will give them money to bail them out. But there was never an attempt in Pakistan to really transform the economy.
So this week in Rajamandala, you focused on Pakistan and how it may seem that Pakistan is won, quote unquote, as you put it in quotes, in Afghanistan, but the reasons it hasn't. Just for a little background, one of the things has been that how closely is this, whether you call it strategic depth, how the Pakistanis put it, important to Pakistan's both strategic as well as, I would say, the identity and importance of the military. Because from Zia's time, this being the facilitator in Afghanistan has been quite essential. Do you think the Pakistani establishment is in some ways also trapped in that prison and by that prison?
I think it dates back to the British Raj. I think Zia complicated it by introducing the Islamic angle to it. But otherwise, the problem for Pakistan has been, it has inherited a border that the British Raj drew between undivided India and Afghanistan. And they drew it across the Pashtun heartlands. That it was not a natural boundary. The Durand line was drawn fairly arbitrarily by the British to suit their convenience. Now, Raj was big enough to exercise dominance. Contrary to the graveyard business, actually, the empire had worked out a set of arrangements with Afghanistan. Even after drawing this line of security arrangements, that Afghanistan will become a protectorate of the British Raj, and that it would not let any other countries gain influence inside it. So the relationship is exclusively to the British Raj. Now, Pakistan's problem has been twofold. One, it is searching for the same kind of relationship without the resources of the Raj. That after all, it's really been, it's a slice of the undivided India. And after second partition, it's really just one slice. But it wants that kind of control over Afghanistan, which the British Raj had. So the talk about strategic depth actually goes back to that. Second problem they've had is the Afghanistan was the only country that did not recognize the creation of Pakistan. In fact, they opposed Pakistan's entry into the United Nations. They said, we've accepted the line because the British were so powerful. That doesn't mean we accept the Durand line. We can't accept the Pakistani claims. So they've had a problem with Pakistan. Pakistan had a problem with Afghanistan right from the beginning. All these people who talk about India, is the India-Pakistan rivalry in Afghanistan. The problem between Pakistan and Afghanistan is sui generis. It has nothing to do with India. That here was a successor state, not of the same capacity, seeking to exercise the same kind of dominance, which the Afghans resent. And they don't accept the boundary drawn by the British. The third set of issues was for Afghans, at least some regimes in Afghanistan thought Pashtuns should be brought back. That is, the areas taken by British should be brought back into Afghanistan. So the talk about Pashtunistan was quite cheap in Afghanistan. And to counter that, what Pakistan has done over the decades is to set up an Islamic kind of an identity for the Pashtuns, which is how the Mujahideen, the Taliban, came into being. So they think, Pakistan thinks religion is a way of neutralizing the complicated ethnic issue that has emerged because of the way the boundaries were drawn, because there are more Pashtuns in Pakistan than in Afghanistan. So I think together these three, the imperial legacy, the Afghanistan's play on the Pashtun card, and Pakistan's attempt to answer it by playing the religious card, I think have complicated the situation. And under Zia, as you mentioned rightly, Pakistan itself was Islamizing under Zia-ul-Haq. So he changed Pakistan into a theocracy. And I think that added to the woes. And that's where the period when the Americans came in, supported the jihad, and the two strands merged, creating this huge bit of a mess in our northwestern frontiers.
There's been this thing, but a lot of people have been writing that one of the ways in which earlier, say, it was American dollars for Afghanistan and Pakistan, that was a big role, even financially for the military, a lot of its resources came from that. And now they'd be hoping perhaps that, in addition to that, or because of that, reduce it, Afghanistan and Pakistan is able to facilitate, say, the expansion of the BRI or the CPEC through Afghanistan onto West Asia and Pakistan. How, if that happens, do you think that could really help Pakistan? You talk about Pakistan's economic woes, which actually, I mean, one of the major results of all of this has been of its geopolitical strategy and domestic politics has been that economically Pakistan was once ahead of India not that long ago, 3-4 decades ago. It's now worse off than Bangladesh and certainly 10 times less in size than India's economy. Do you think that is something they will have to now see seriously, and what is the timeline like for a stable Taliban government even to come about, for the Chinese to really put their money in the region and for Pakistan to benefit from that?
Akash, that's a good question. I think there are two issues here. One, economic development can take place, whether it is American money or Chinese money or Russian pipelines, or the Gulf can bring in a lot of money there. All that is possible only if there is a stable political situation. That is, that you have a situation where people can put the money, outsiders can expect a reasonable rate of return. Now, it is by no means clear that Taliban has any strategy for economic modernization. They keep saying nice things about China. But do they really believe in economic modernization? Do they want foreign capital? Look, we've argued on these issues for so long that firstly, they have to produce peace and security, which, as my piece argues, that it has not been easy to produce an internal harmony in Afghanistan. So therefore, if they actually succeed in that, yes, there will be foreign investment, and that can do. But first, they have to produce that accommodation, which means compromise with the other ethnic minorities, tolerance towards religious minorities, and the willingness to avoid exporting terrorism. Now, if Pakistan can persuade Afghanistan to do this, the whole world will love Pakistan. But Pakistan itself is into business of exporting terrorism. Can they actually do this? So that is the first problem, because money can't be put in without stability, and the question of stability is out there. The second is, if Pakistan was a thriving economy, and if it was connected to India, that is, if it was trading with its largest neighbor, with this largest neighbor, in a sense, largest border with India, a natural flows in the Punjab, which was an undivided state at one point of time. So they don't trade with India. So you're trying to hold your nose by taking your hand around your head. If they open trade between India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, there will be dramatic growth for all three of us. But Pakistan does not want to trade with us. It rather get China across the Karakorums in the name of CPEC. Once upon a time, there was the Silk Road that ran between the Punjab into Central Asia, or between Lahore and Amritsar were connected cities. There you block it completely. You don't let any trade happen with India. And you talk about economics, geoeconomics, we're going to let, and when General Bajwa seemed to try to get some trade done, Imran Khan and the civilians opposed it. Yeah. So I think they have a problem. See, they're actually a barrier. They're a barrier to natural flows of trade in South Asia, but they want to bring in the Chinese, and somehow that will solve their problem. So that is the second. So you can think of Chinese money coming in and they can creating trade, but Pakistan itself is not a thriving economy. And one of the problems with Pakistan is, look at their elite after partition, largely thought economics is a kind of commerce is a third-rate stuff. It is for the bunch of wimps to do it, and the masculine for the heroes would only wield the sword. So they thought they can outsource the economics initially to the Americans, to the Saudis, and now to the Chinese. But then if Pakistan itself is not a thriving economy, trade as a strategy to stabilize Afghanistan is always going to be problematic.
Yeah. The final question, connected, you've answered it somewhat already, but is, General Bajwa, before this Afghanistan crisis at Mumbai, there was a lot of talk of the Bajwa Doctrine, geoeconomics, the ceasefire with India sort of being restarted. And even now it's largely held. In terms of Kashmir, there has been less, by all accounts, there has been less, there are less fighters coming in from across the border now, and all of those things. How do you see that Bajwa Doctrine, and there's a new chief coming up, I think, in Pakistan beginning of next year or end of this year. How do you see that Bajwa Doctrine being modified or abandoned or being affected by this thing in Afghanistan, the shift of focus to Afghanistan or hope and even attention?
Look, I think on the face of it, what Bajwa said was unexceptionable. He said, look, Pakistan needs peace with its neighbors. We focus too much on geopolitics. We need geoeconomics. We need trade. We need cooperation with our two neighbors. And therefore, they seem to support a ceasefire with India. But he kept a little caveat, throwing in the Kashmir question, and then the whole ambiguities out there. Do they accept the changes in India or not? What does India have to do to actually open up? But Imran Khan turned down even the smallest suggestions that came, which was sugar and cement were available cheaply in India, and Pakistan desperately needed them. So the Commerce Ministry recommended, look, why don't we get it from India? But Imran Khan came back and said, look, till Kashmir is sorted out, we are not going to do any trade with India. So where is the geoeconomics here? I mean, I think in a way, they're not united on it. And he said, what did he say? Kashmiron ke khoon pe sauda nahi ho sakta. So if you take that kind of a position, then there is the Chinese, took Japanese money after Japanese occupation for brutal occupation. Chinese and Taiwanese trade with each other. So there is a sense of commerce that while you're political rivals, you can do business. But for Pakistan, it has just not been possible to imagine a economic framework for their national development. And it was just getting aid from the Americans, use their geopolitical location, so somebody else will pay the bills. Saudis will give them free oil, or Chinese will give them money to bail them out. But there was never an attempt in Pakistan to really transform the economy. And that is the problem. And that is the main argument of the paper. Look, there is so much of, hand-wringing in Delhi. Oh my God, this is going to make Pakistan so powerful. They'll use the levers for terrorism. That's what they've done for 30 years. So how is it different? I mean, I think if they've thrown everything they have at you, we managed to hold it. And last 5-6 years, there's been no major terror attacks. So what is it that we are so, anxious about Pakistan? Pakistan has problems and it has vulnerabilities. And so I think we need also to be a little more calmer, looking at it long term and through a historical perspective of the structural problems in Afghanistan itself. Rather than, if Pakistan is celebrating, oh my fantastic triumph, India says, oh my God, this is a fantastic threat for us. So I think step back and we look at this issue calmly. Then I think Pakistan has huge problems. And India then must see how this plays out rather than this over, dramatizing the threat from Pakistan and then sneaking it into our own domestic discourse. I think that will be introducing a needless poison. So we've handled Pakistani terrorism threat for the last 30 years. And I think India can do it. And we are dealing with a weaker Pakistan with the much stronger resources and capabilities in India's hand today than when terrorism started in the late 1980s.
Great, sir. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Akash.